Mom, listen. I've divorced Robert, and I'm currently staying at a hotel, but I'll be bringing Linda over to your place. When I was too perplexed to say anything, my daughter Susan quickly hung up the phone. I'm home. A few days later, Susan arrived, dragging a large suitcase while her daughter Linda had a travel backpack on. Both of them kicked off their shoes and entered the house. Mom, is my room available? She said as she walked into the living room. Susan looked puzzled. When she saw Mary, her brother's wife, among the welcoming family, she clicked her tongue slightly. Why are you here? But before she could dwell on that question, James cut in.
The two of them are living together now. It makes sense for her to be here.
Upon hearing this, Susan's mood soured. What are you doing relaxing in my house as if it's yours? Ridiculous. Someone who just spends money living with us? We're going to live here now, and it's cramped with you around. Don't let your dropout stupidity rub off on the kids. Get out. Mary froze, her smile fading. It was clear that Susan looked down on and disliked Mary. Susan gestured for her to leave. This behavior angered everyone further, heating up the arguments between James and John. However, it was Mary who spoke up. Understood. If Susan says so, I'll leave soon. Just give me some time. Hearing this, Susan smiled satisfactorily. See, you're reasonable. People like you don't belong in this house. Mary bowed her head and slowly walked out of the living room. I hurried after Mary, trying to stop her by grabbing her arm. But no matter how much I said, there's no need for you to leave. Mary wouldn't listen and started packing her bags. It was unfair for Mary, who had done nothing wrong. While Mary was packing, I came up with an idea. Well then, if that's how it is. I whispered something secretly to Mary. My name is Karen. I'm a housewife about to turn 55, living a fulfilling life with my husband James and my son and his wife. My son John got married last spring and held the ceremony. Mary is a wonderful person, always cheerful with a bright smile, and has a pleasant personality. She's petite with long flowing hair. Initially, they lived separately, but when John's job location changed, moving in with us became more practical since it was closer to his workplace. We've been living together for about 6 months. When they first suggested moving in, neither James nor I opposed, but I was worried about how Mary would take it. After all, I'm her mother-in-law, and she might not be keen on the idea. I worried about this until they moved in. One night, James said, Aren't you worrying too much? Mary isn't like that. Really? Mary is skilled at sewing, right? John mentioned that. And you like knitting, so you'll probably get along. James optimistically said this and sipped the coffee he made. Indeed, having common interests might help us bond faster, so I looked forward to their moving day. On the day they arrived, John was off work, and they came with a moving truck. We're here to cause trouble. Oh, this is for you. As soon as she arrived, Mary handed over a package of sweets. Surprised, I opened it to find an assortment of famous confections. You didn't have to go to such trouble. No, I had to bring something. We'll be inconveniencing you. Inconvenience? Not at all. The house is small, but please make yourself at home. Thank you. After that day, we were both a bit stiff and nervous for about a week. But as we talked about knitting, we warmed up to each other. Mary got excited talking about the local craft store. The conversations about the satisfaction of completing a project were endless. Mary learned to sew in elementary school. She had no relatives and came from a children's home, where the staff noticed her dexterity and taught her sewing. Starting with button sewing, Mary gradually learned to enjoy making things like children's aprons and small etiquette pouches. Over time, she became capable of making almost anything, including clothes and tote bags as an adult. I started to enjoy making things, and now I can make just about anything from clothes to tote bags. she said with a smile, looking vibrant and somehow making me feel more energetic and a bit younger. Mary was also incredibly thoughtful. Once she found out that James liked to have coffee after dinner. She started making it for him every night. She also took care of the garden, cleaned the storage shed, and tidied up around the water fixtures. James cherished Mary, as if she were his own daughter. The only thing that bothered me was when Mary put herself down for being a dropout when we were alone. She couldn't afford to go to high school and had to start working right after middle school. I encouraged her, saying, "It's okay." But I wasn't sure if that really cleared her worries. Mary probably felt insecure about it because Susan, her sister-in-law, teased her. Susan, John's older sister by 3 years, had a mean streak that no amount of scolding could fix. Susan went to college and got a job at a major bank. She would go to dinner parties with friends and acquaintances, targeting wealthy men to date or break up with. It seemed like her relationships often soured, probably because her personality was difficult to deal with. I worried no one would marry her if she didn't change. But that worry was unnecessary when she introduced her fiancé a few years ago. He came from a family of doctors, and now worked in internal medicine at a large hospital. James and I thought we wouldn't be troubled by her anymore. But even after that, she would say things like, "My brother is so presumptuous," about John. At family gatherings with Mary, Susan always had complaints. "Is this girl John's wife? She looks so plain." "Susan, don't be rude." I would chide her, but Susan never changed her attitude. Even when James and I said, "Think of us
As your real family.
Susan laughed mockingly. "Seriously, Dad, Mom? A stupid family like this is impossible." I still remember her mocking laughter. "Hey, Dad, Mom, are you serious? I can't deal with a stupid family." I still remember the sound of her laughing in ridicule. Susan kept calling, bragging about going on an overseas trip, and eating gourmet food, and getting a designer bag as a gift, showing off her wealth. There's a child named Linda, my granddaughter, who also tends to brag. I thought it might be better to correct this bragging habit, but whenever I tried, "Don't meddle in our parenting," she would snap, leaving me helpless. Susan was a troublesome daughter. One sunny autumn day, accustomed to life with John and the others, I got a call from Susan. Another boast, I suppose. I'm so tired of it. Muttering in annoyance, I answered the phone, only to hear Susan crying. "Mom, listen, I got divorced. I'm staying at a hotel right now, and I'm coming over with Linda." But... "Please, bye." Before I could say anything, Susan hung up. Despite her request, there was no room available, leaving me wondering where to welcome them. I cleaned up my room that day, cleared out half the closet, thinking it'd be cramped, but they had to stay here. As I was tidying up, Mary returned from shopping, surprised at what I was doing. "Why are you emptying your room?" "Susan and Linda are coming back. She's divorced now. Since there's no room, they'll use mine." "What? So where will you sleep?" "I'll make room in my room, so sleep there." "What are you saying? You need to take care of yourself now. I'll sleep in the living room." A few days later, Susan and Linda, unaware of anything, returned. "We're home." Susan dragged a large suitcase, and Linda carried a travel backpack. Both of them kicked off their shoes and entered the house. "Mom, is my room available, huh?" Entering the living room, they found me, James, John, and Mary just enjoying a family moment. Seeing Mary, Susan clicked her tongue softly. "Why are you here?" But before she could continue, James intervened.
"Susan, These two are living with us now. It's only natural. Besides, Robert told us everything about your situation.
In the days that followed, while preparing the room, we also contacted Robert to understand the reasons behind the divorce. The reasons were surprising to both me and James.
Susan, you were in charge of your husband's wallet, spending lavishly on trips abroad and designer bags, leaving most household chores to his service.
Susan looked uncomfortable.
He even doubted whether those trips were really just with Linda, suggesting you might have been with friends.
Huh? What now? I'm tired from the divorce, and coming back here, I don't want to hear this. I have a room, right? Susan sighed heavily, ready to take her suitcase upstairs. Me and James stopped her. Wait a minute. Let's finish this conversation. Tell us the truth. There's no truth. It's all lies from him. I went on trips with friends and Linda was there. It's just spending a little money.
It's not just a little. The thing is.
Watching this, Mary stepped in. Her hair swayed uneasily. James, let's leave it at that. We can talk some other time. Susan must be tired. Please, go to your room, Mary said with a smile. Knowing Susan didn't think highly of her, preferring to avoid any involvement, but chose to diffuse the situation, touching my heart with her magnanimity. Yet Susan's face grew even more distressed. What, making yourself at home? Living with someone who squanders money? Now that we're here, it's cramped because of you. Stupidity spreads to the kids. Get out. Mary was taken aback by the harshness and the words, her smile fading. James, John, and I couldn't help but respond angrily to Susan.
Susan, apologize to Mary. What a terrible thing to say. It's awful. Mary isn't stupid, nor does she just waste money.
I hate being around such idiots. Susan waved her hand, showing the back of it as if to say go away. James and John became even more incensed at her actions.
We never agreed to you coming back in the first place. Do you understand that?
But this is my parents' house, so it's natural for me to come back.
This may be your parents' house, but coming back like this is unbelievable. Sis, how do you plan to cover living expenses? You quit your job, right?
Well, yes. I'll take a break from work for a while, so John and Dad can support me and Linda until I find a job. Mom can take care of Linda. Susan has always been like this, quite self-centered. That's why I was reluctant to accept her back. Hey, just to clarify, by when do you plan to find a job? It's almost time for Linda to start preschool. And what about picking her up? How am I supposed to know when I'll find a job? And Mom, you will pick Linda up once I start working, right? That's much better than using Mary. We can't just do that on request. Susan seems determined to stay here and have us look after her and Linda. Linda, unable to keep up with the adults' argument, tried to get attention by crying and shouting. That's how it's going to be, so please understand. What an attitude she has. Everyone was stunned by her. It felt like time stopped for a moment. But then Mary spoke up unexpectedly. Understood. If Susan says so. I'll be leaving soon, so please give me some time. Hearing this, Susan smiled contentedly. See, that's very understanding of you. You realized you're a nuisance in this house. Mary bowed her head and slowly left the living room. I rushed to stop Mary, grabbing her arm. But no matter how much I said, there's no need for you to leave. Mary wouldn't listen and started packing her things. I felt sad, wondering if there was anything I could do. It wasn't fair for Mary, who had done nothing wrong. While Mary was packing, I suddenly came up with an idea. Well, if that's how it is, I whispered something to Mary. Weeks after Susan's return, the mornings and evenings had grown colder, and the autumn leaves in the nearby park had progressed, making it feel fully like autumn. Mary had found a new place, finished the viewings, signed the lease, and started moving her belongings. Susan was happy to see this,
and Linda had learned to look down on others, pointing and laughing. Linda, stop pointing at people. Even when I scolded her, Linda seemed to enjoy herself, sticking out her tongue and laughing. She complained about the food Mary and I cooked, spat it out as if it was a game, and the house was a mess with sand and mud from playing in the sandbox. Talking to Susan was of no use.
Don't you think it's good for kids to be lively? Don't you agree, Mom?
I wanted to say that wasn't the point, but I was too tired to argue. James and John were still on bad terms with Susan, and the house was in chaos. But it would all be over with a bit more patience. One Sunday night, after helping Mary unpack at her new place, I received a call from Susan. During the day, me, James, John, and Mary had gone to the new place, leaving Susan alone at home. It was dark, and she must have grown impatient waiting for us to return, and called.
Hey, Mom, when are you coming back? I'm hungry and want the laundry done. Linda probably wants to sleep, too.
To that, I replied sharply, we're not coming back there. Susan was shocked on the other end of the phone, hurling insults.
Don't joke. What do you mean? I haven't heard about this. Come back and make dinner.
And other such immature comments from a mother.
I see. So I'm being blamed by that dropout idiot, am I?
Am I the dropout idiot you're referring to?
Why does it turn out this way? Didn't you say the dropout idiot was Mary?
I'm a dropout, too. At that moment, the other end of the phone went silent. Perhaps it's more accurate to say she was speechless. Because you said you couldn't stand being with the dropout, right? Well, Dad and I are dropouts, too. We've decided to move out as well. After a few seconds of silence, Susan started to make excuses hastily.
I never said anything like that. Besides, you'll miss Linda if you don't come back, right? It doesn't matter what your and Dad's educational backgrounds are. Please come back.
I don't want to be with a daughter who judges people by their education alone. Linda has been left with her father, so there's no need to worry.
Linda? Why?
We had taken Linda out shopping and handed her over to Robert on the way. He had wanted to take custody when he brought up divorce, but it seems Susan had taken and hidden her before any proper discussion. That's why we didn't immediately return home and stayed in a hotel for a while, keeping away from Susan and her family.
Give Linda back.
You hardly disciplined Linda and left her mostly to her own devices. That's not parenting. She deserves a proper education in a proper family. I hung up the phone as Susan continued to scream. Despite her multiple calls afterward, I set my phone to ignore her calls and put it down. When I looked up, I caught Mary's anxious gaze. I smiled and gave her a thumbs up. It's okay. Mary smiled back, reassured. A week after moving in, we had become reasonably acquainted with the neighbors. Mary and I spent our days in our slightly larger new house, cleaning, cooking, and dedicating time to our hobbies of sewing and knitting. The reasons for moving here included the presence of a craft store nearby and a sewing and knitting club that met several times a month. When we first attended, both the instructors and the students were welcoming and kind. One afternoon, I suggested to Mary, I'm thinking of setting up a booth at the handmade market in the neighboring town this year. How about joining me? Mary modestly said, I don't have to participate. But with encouragement from our club friends, she decided to. Now we are preparing items for the market. Afterwards, Susan, who had been sitting in the parental home for a while, moved to a rundown apartment 1 or 2 months later. The house was actually rented, with quite a high monthly rent. Of course, the rent and utilities were priced for a family, and Susan had been relying on James and John's earnings, so she probably didn't have enough money to cover these expenses. She inevitably had to move to an apartment to live on her own. Susan was essentially unemployed, and raising Linda in such a condition would have been difficult. There was even a risk that both mother and daughter could end up homeless. Initially, it was a bit hard to separate Linda from her mother, but given how things turned out, it seems it was a good decision to leave her with Robert. I thought we wouldn't be bothered by Susan anymore. But recently, a letter from Robert arrived, surprising both me and James. It revealed that the child support paid by Robert for Linda was actually being spent on nightclubs. Knowing Susan's spending habits, Robert had hired a detective to ensure the child support was really being used for Linda. Reading that letter, I recalled how Susan would sometimes leave the house after returning to the parental home.
For job hunting,
Or,
to dine out with friends.
and sometimes not return until morning. It was clear that she had been out having fun, but I wondered where the money for such activities had come from. I had never imagined she was actually going to those kinds of places and spending the night drinking. Part of me wanted to believe in my own daughter. The letter continued, stating that after learning the truth, Robert intended to sue Susan for damages. From the date, it seemed that payments had already started. I hadn't heard anything from Susan, but even if I did, I couldn't sympathize or lend her any money. Due to Susan making such significant payments, Linda's custody was considered difficult for her and was transferred to Robert. I felt a bit relieved, thinking that in a doctor's family, she would be properly educated and disciplined. Above all, my impression of Robert was that he was a very gentle young man who loved children. Though I hardly see Linda now, she must be living without any discomfort. While thinking about how to reply to the letter, just as my pen stopped moving, Mary brought in some coffee.
Karen, I've made some coffee.
Oh, thank you so much. As I sipped the warm coffee, more thoughts about the letter came to mind, and I smiled a little.
What's up?
I was thinking about what to write next. I wrote about how the four of us are living happily together, not in contact with Susan, among other things. But there's one more thing I need to write about. That is, about the baby in Mary's belly. When we thought everything had settled down after the move, Mary's health took a turn, and a hospital visit revealed she was pregnant. She was about 3 months along, and her belly is starting to show a little. Though we don't yet know the gender, the thought of a new family member brings us indescribable joy. Mary is enthusiastic.
I'll make clothes for the baby.
And I'm planning to knit hats and socks. I included that in my letter. Please take care not to overdo it. Take good care of yourself. Mary, looking down and stroking her belly, said,
I wonder if I can be a good mother.
I've thought the same thing, but it'll be fine. The baby in your belly will grow and be born healthy. They'll wear the clothes you make, so don't worry. I reassured her gently, as if speaking to my own daughter. Yeah, you're right. Mary nodded slowly, shedding quiet tears, but I pretended not to see. The handmade market is approaching fast. The theme for the market is Christmas gifts. We've already received the most irreplaceable and wonderful gift of all.